we just passed the 15th anniversary of the very first Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo fight, which is one of the most historic action fights of all time. And Robert wanted to come on and talk about it. And, you know, we are kind of into the thing of rewatching fights and talking about them. And I think it's a good opportunity to do so. Robert, you're here. Apologize. We were trying to do this last week as well to be a little bit closer to that anniversary, but at least we can do it now. Better late than never.
Yeah, and in my opinion, this is one of the 5 greatest fights in the history of boxing, and it ain't number 5.
So what Robert is actually referencing is if you've been to fightgamemedia.com lately, you may have seen not only his pieces on the greatest featherweights, which is the list that we are on now, but also he's been posting his greatest fights of all times list. We are posting 5 fights at a time until we get into the top 20, and then we'll sort of change the rhythm of those posts. Want to extend out the post because there's lots of really good writing in there, and I want people to really read them, and we'll have videos and stuff embedded in those posts. But so that's what Robert is referencing. So he's giving you a little bit of a sneak preview as we get to the top 5. This will be within the top 5. Yes. Now, when it comes to just the overall memory of this fight, and we'll break it down in a second, but I think, you know, even though the fight is great, what actually overshadows everything is the fact that Corrales passes away 2 years to the day of the fight. And like just the sadness and you know, as the end of sort of the end of the fight and the 2 years after this fight between the two, you know, he's pretty beat up because of this fight, and then, you know, just really sad the way that he passes away 2 years later. So it's that kind of that overshadows almost everything to me.
This fight is a lot like a lot of great classic fights in which both fighters are never the same. You know, the Thriller Manila, Frazier and Ali were never the same. Meldrick Taylor versus Julio Cesar Chavez, neither fighter, especially Taylor, was never the same. The first Jose Luis Castillo versus Diego Corrales fight, neither fighter was ever the same. Corrales never won another fight after this. He lost his next 3 fights and then, like you said, died on a motorcycle accident when he was drunk. His alcohol level at the time of his death was .25. The legal limit in the state of California, you live there, so you could correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is .8. So it was 3 times the legal limit. He was a damaged fighter, and he had a very troubled life. He even went to prison for 14 months. I'll go into it. Before this fight, he had been in prison just 2 years prior. So Diego lived a very, very fast and troubled life inside and outside the ring.
So let's talk about this fight. I think most people will have seen it or at least heard about it, but the 10th round is it's the one of the most memorable rounds that you're ever going to see. But my first question is, outside of the 10th round, what was your favorite round? Because there are so many great rounds in this fight.
Oh my God. You pick and choose. The 6th round, the 7th round, the 8th round, because the 6th through 8th round was back and forth. And it was a similar pattern. Corrales would rock Castillo early and take the first half, and then Castillo would rock Corrales right before the end of the round. What round? It was either the 7th or 8th round where it was the reverse, where it was the end of the 7th round where Corrales rocked Castillo, picked him up off his feet with a spectacular left hook, and then began the next round going after Castillo. And then the second half of the round, Castillo turned it around and staggered Corrales. It was just, the 10th round is the best round of the fight. That's one of the greatest rounds in the history of boxing. But beginning with the 2nd round to the 9th round, back and forth action. Not one step taken back. Castillo was like Julio Cesar Chavez light in his style, and it's funny. You see Junior and Senior in the third row watching the fight, and they're just transfixed. Like, what the fuck am I watching here? they look like zombies. They're so into the fight. But he had one of the greatest chins of his era, and he kept coming and coming and coming. Corrales was a tall fighter who fought small. He never fought tall. One of the reasons why Floyd Jr. was able to just easily batter him and put him out, because he never fought tall. Corrales, had he been trained by an Emmanuel Stewart, could have been a great fighter. He was a very good fighter who was severely flawed. He never met a punch. He could dodge. No defense whatsoever. He had tremendous power in both hands, and he went on that. But that's not going to take you long. He was washed up at the age of 20. He's 26 in this fight, going on 27. He's practically washed up after this fight at a very young age.
So I was going to say round 8 is my favorite, obviously, other than the last 10th round.
Right.
And
yeah, because you're right, because at the end of the 7th, he staggers Castillo with a left hook, and then he comes real quick on Castillo, and then Castillo turns it around. You're right. The 8th round of the 10th is the best round of the fight.
Well, there is so much back and forth trading that it looks like a Rocky movie without the dramatic music and the crazy knockdowns. But it's like you feel like, oh wow, like Corrales has him, and then nope. 10 seconds later, Castillo has him. And so it's so back and forth that the entire round you're thinking both of these guys are going to get knocked down, or they're going to get stopped, but it just keeps going. The action is insane, and I think that sort of sets the tone for that 10th round. If the crowd is playing very much into this, I think by the end of the first round, they don't quite give like that standing O, but you can sense just by the sound of the crowd at the end of that first, like they're looking at each other going like, okay, we are here in for a treat. Like they could tell right when that round is over.
I knew going into this fight that this fight could be a classic, because neither fighter takes a step backwards. These guys were meant to fight each other. Like I said, Corrales was a tall fighter, but like a Riddick Bowe, he was a tall fighter that could fight inside. He fought better inside than outside. He really never, even though at one point when Buddy McGirt was his trainer, he was able to one time box and defeat Joel Casamayor by fighting tall. The only time I ever saw him actually outbox a boxer, he outboxed Casamayor after being stopped in their first fight. He beat Casamayor in a rematch, and then he destroyed Acelino Freitas to set up this unification fight with Jose Luis Castillo. The Freitas fight was more of a brawl, two guys just going at it, and he was a harder puncher than the hard-hitting Brazilian Freitas. I knew going into this fight, because Castillo never took a step back, Corrales is not taking a step back, that this was going to be a war. I just didn't know it was going to be this good. It was better. It was better than what I would dream. I could not believe this.
If you go back to 2005, what was the outlook coming into the fight? Who was favored? As far as the trajectory of where both of their careers were going. You had mentioned, Corrales soon thereafter was pretty much done. Like
because of this fight. Because of this fight.
How were they both seen coming into this fight in 2005?
Well, they both were in their primes going into this fight. Castillo was a tough son of a bitch. He gave Floyd Mayweather hell in both fights they fought. Mayweather barely won the first fight and convincingly won the second fight, but Castillo pressured Mayweather like no other. The only other fight I ever saw pressure Mayweather like Castillo did was Marcos Maidana in their first fight. Closest I ever seen to somebody pressure. That's why we said at lightweight, had Floyd fought Duran would have beaten Floyd, because He puts more pressure than them two guys combined. But Castillo rebounded after Floyd left the lightweight division and regained the WBC lightweight championship. I don't know what I don't go by the odds makers. I don't know what the betting line was, but I thought Corrales was going to beat Castillo because he was the heavier puncher and the taller guy, and I thought he would knock out Castillo, but I thought he'd knock him out quicker. I didn't think it would take him this long and him on the brink of almost getting killed before he did it.
And then, when we get to the 10th round, there are two knockdowns, but the man who actually wins the fight is the man who gets knocked down twice. Do you remember what you were thinking in this 10th round? Because there's a couple things that happen. So Corrales gets hit with a body shot, goes down, and he spits out his mouthpiece, and so that gives him a little break. And I think I saw one of the pieces that you sent me where Goosen was talking about how he put the clear mouthpiece in the clear ice, and thus it took him a little bit longer to fish it out and clean it because he couldn't find it. Like, hint, hint. This is why we're going to use some time here to
Joe Goosen was the star of this fight because I love it. After the second knockdown, he puts the mouthpiece in Corrales and said, "You better fucking get inside of him now."
Yes.
I love that shit. Joe Goosen. Oh, he was great. Joe Goosen. I have an issue with Joe Goosen, but Joe Goosen probably knew from training Corrales that Corrales wasn't going to listen to him as far as boxing. So he told him, just keep doing what you do and stay inside, stay inside. He didn't once tell him to stay outside and box. But that was just, you better fucking get inside now. I love that. Joe Goosen was great at that point. That was done on purpose, of course. And that was the first time I had ever seen any fighter do that. And that was the beginning of a trend that the ABC, the American Boxing Council, the sanctioning body of rules throughout the United States, puts that you can't do that again. If you do that, you automatically get deducted points. So you don't see that anymore. And he did get deducted, and he was way behind after that. Because look, 2 knockdowns is 10-7. Tony Weeks takes a point away for spitting out the mouthpiece. That's 10-6.
That's the fight.
He needs a knockout because the fight was even going into the 10th round. He needs a knockout now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Castillo made a huge mistake. Castillo's a phenomenal body puncher. He went headhunting, which was Corrales' only shot, and he walked into a spectacular left hook that froze him, and then Corrales turned the tables around him and then landed one combination after another, left hook, right cross, that froze. He was out on his feet up against the ropes. If there was no ropes there, Garrett, he would have been sitting on Chavez Sr. and Jr.'s lap.
So Corrales comes back, wins the fight, and I don't know what the shot was, but he hits Castillo with a shot, and just Castillo's body posture just changes.
Yeah. It was a left hook, right cross combination. Oh, you talking about the first punch?
Yeah.
It was a left hook that Castillo walked right into.
Yeah.
And then that turned everything around. And all of a sudden, it sapped Castillo of his power. Castillo made a huge mistake. He should have went to Corrales' body. He's going after Corrales, giving Corrales a chance, because even though Corrales is hurt, he still hits. He still got daggers in both hands.
Yeah.
He walks into that left hook, and now they reverse the roles. He's hurt. Once he's up against the ropes, he's helpless. He's out on his feet. And Tony Weeks did a spectacular job of refereeing this fight. Took away that point when he had to and stopped the fight at the right time. Even though people were crying about the stoppage, one more punch and Castillo could have been killed. He was out on his feet.
So there's a bit of a sad, I guess not really sad, but frustrating aftermath of this fight, which is You just had such a great fight.
Right.
People want to see it again, and they try to turn it around in 3 months, which is not nearly enough time for both of these guys
to recover from the beating that they took.
Not only to recover, but to get back into tip-top shape, because they're going to fight again and they're going to go through hell again. And I just thought that was such a sad thing. Like, how does that fight get made? And why is the commission okay with them getting back in? I'm assuming a lot of this is the fighters wanting that payday and not saying, I need more time.
And it was a disappointing rematch because Castillo did not make the weight. Corrales agreed to more money to fight him and for the belt not to be on the line, but Corrales took a horrific beating because Castillo really didn't train. He came in very heavy and he beat the hell out of Corrales. Then they were going to have a third fight, this time with the title on the line. Castillo did the same thing, and Corrales was like, nah, we're not. The fight was canceled the day before. The day of the weigh-in, the night before the fight was canceled. The third fight.
So what was Castillo's deal? I mean, he obviously was probably too heavy for the weight class, but I mean, that is just so disrespectful the second time. But then to come back and do it for the third fight, that's just reckless. That's reckless.
And then Corrales talked all this shit, signed to fight Joe Casamigno for a third fight, and he didn't come in at the lightweight limit. And Casamigno said, nah, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight for your title. If Casamigno wins, he gets the title. Corrales can't get the title because can't retain the title. And Casamigno beats Corrales by decision. Corrales was a hypocrite because he tore it to Castillo. And then in his fight against Casamigno, he can't make the weight. And then Corrales fights one more time against Joshua Clottey. And Clottey beat the shit out of Corrales. And Corrales had moved up to welterweight. And you think at 6'1", he would fill in welterweight perfectly. But he was a shot fighter from the from the two beatings he suffered against Castillo, from the beatings against Casamigno, from the beating that Floyd Mayweather gave him back in 2001, all those beatings finally add up. And at the age of 28, he was washed up. Then at the age of 29, he dies in that horrific motorcycle accident.
So Castillo, you mentioned Floyd, and it made me think about, he also fought Floyd.
Yeah.
And twice, actually.
Yep.
And probably gave Floyd, one of his closest fights ever.
The two toughest fights Floyd had in his career were Marcos Maidana and Jose Luis Castillo, because both guys in their respective first fights, put pressure on Floyd, threw a lot of punches, went to the body, crowded Floyd, didn't give Floyd a chance to do that posturing where he sets you up, where he measures you with his left hand, and then, figures you out. No, they stayed on top of him, and both fights were very close decision wins by Floyd. Now, Floyd figured out how to beat them in the rematches, and the rematches were much easier fights. But Castillo, in that first fight with Floyd, there were about 5-6 rounds, Garrett, that could have gone either way. If Castillo would have won, I couldn't have said it was a robbery. Yeah. A lot of people thought Castillo had won, but you got to watch that fight. There are a lot of rounds where there's a lot of mauling and grabbing and holding, where there's not a lot of punches being thrown, and it's up to you to decide who you think won that fight. The aggressiveness of Castillo, or maybe Floyd's defense, or landing one or two more punches. Is up to how you perceive that round. That was one of the toughest fights I ever had to score. The second fight was much more clearer because Floyd kept the fight in the middle of the ring. He wasn't up against the ropes like he was throughout the majority of the first Castillo fight. Same thing with Maidana. Remember the Maidana fight? Maidana even knocked the tooth out of Floyd in the first fight. He gave Floyd hell.
Well, and I think the other thing about that is the announcers were clearly of the opinion that Castillo was winning that fight. Now, the announcing team can be a little bit persuasive and maybe a little bit too much persuasive, but that's kind of their job.
That's their job.
So I think a lot of fans who were so up in arms about that decision, some of that was because they were just listening to the announced team.
Larry Merchant has always had a a dislike for Floyd Mayweather since the very beginning. It always came out almost to the point where Floyd threatened him to one of their post. If I was only 40 years younger, you wouldn't do shit.
That was an amazing moment.
And Harold Letterman, always goes for the aggressive boxer. So those two guys, but because Lampley was more partial, but Merchant and Letterman were both painting the picture that Castillo was winning this fight easy, and it wasn't an easy fight. That was a very, very tough fight, and Floyd wins the decision, gives him an immediate rematch, and in the rematch, he definitely won. The first fight could have gone either way.
When Floyd talks about his toughest fights, does this one come up, or does he not think that this was actually tough?
He always gave Castillo all the credit in the world. Never badmouth Castillo. Check the post-fight interviews of both fights. He gave Castillo the utmost respect.
All right, so can we talk a little bit about the series that you're writing? We are up to.
Before we continue, I want one last thing about Corrales. After Corrales had a very troubled life, died at the age of 29. We talked about, and it's ironic how you died 2 years to the day of one of the greatest fights in boxing history. The same date, May 7th. Unbelievable, which is also my birthday, by the way.
Oh, wow.
He right after Floyd wiped the mat with him, he went to prison for 14 months, Diego, for beating his pregnant girlfriend. He had a very troubled career, led a very fast life inside and outside the ring. After Floyd had beaten him, he took a swing at his own father, Ray Woods, his trainer, because Ray Woods stopped the fight.
Yep.
And fired his father, and they never spoke again. Even to the point when he died, they never spoke again, because like a week or two after losing to Floyd, he went to prison for 14 months for beating his pregnant girlfriend. So Diego had a very troubled life, and he wasn't going to retire, so he was going to die young one way or the other, because the beatings he was taking in the ring, unbelievable.